Helen Peacock is speaking with us and sharing an inspiring idea that Rotarians could not only be leaders in building positive peace around the world, they could also be leaders in ending the use of war as a way to resolve conflict. In her presentation, Helen directly addresses the old argument that Rotary can't be political, encourages us instead to recognize our potential, even more impactfully shift our planet to peace. In just the last few months, clubs in over 40 districts have responded to her call for action. I'm sure you've all read her bio. If not, I can send it out later. Quite an interesting lady. I have spoken with her on and off for a couple of years, then once again re-met her in India as she gave this presentation in India. And it's a message that I feel that we all need to hear and decide. And I'm looking forward to our discussion afterwards. Helen, if you would like to proceed.
Okay, so I'm just going to screen share.
And welcome Bill Timpson from Fort Collins.
Got it, bring.
And Tina is with us from California. So we have Columbus, Fort
Hello.
Collins.
Hello. Right. Okay. Everybody can see this?
Yes.
Beautiful. And I think what I'll do is I will take away, so you don't see me twice. I will take that away. Okay. I did. Okay, are we all set, gang? This is actually a tape of the presentation I gave Tuesday night when I could still talk to the Rotary E-group of World Peace. So here we go.
Everything's fine, Helen, go ahead.
Beautiful. All right. So fellow peace builders, all of you, I feel like I'm talking to my tribe. I'm sincerely asking this question, and I think all of you in the audience tonight are going to say, of course, world peace is a possibility. That's why we're here. And when I talk about world peace, I'm talking about the absence of war as a means of resolving conflict. I'm not talking about the absence of conflict. And I find that when I talk to many Rotary clubs, they think it's a pipe dream that we can actually eliminate war on the planet. My other question, I call it the mystery question, is why do we still have war anyway? I mean, if survey after survey says that people want peace, how come we still have war? So we'll look into this a little more deeply, but before we do, I want to share an experience I had. My husband and I were in Panama just before the pandemic struck about a year ago. And we were reading about the Panama invasion, which you may recall happened in 1989. And we were learning that it had been concentrated in an area called El Chorrillo. And we wanted to go to El Chorrillo, but to our astonishment, the concierge in our hotel refused to help us, saying he could not guarantee our safety. So we spoke to a friend we'd made on the street who reluctantly agreed to take us, provided we slumped down in the car and didn't draw attention to ourselves. And off we went to El Chorrillo. He said it wasn't just our safety he was worried about, it was his as well, because he was with us and we looked American. So we're slumped down in the car, we're driving into El Chorrillo, and the first thing we see was this huge, very fresh, very angry mural on the wall. And for those of you who don't speak Spanish, it says,
Helen, you're not seeing the video.
Forgive. Okay, just a
And
sec.
thinking,
oh my God. Hold on, guys. We'll try again.
It was with us for a little while, then went away on the.
Okay. Just a minute.
QuickTime Player.
Oh my gosh.
What's
okay?
Screen share.
Next moment, this. Okay, so I'm going to come back to about here of conflict, and I find that when I talk to many Rotarian,
yes, and I would ask everybody else to mute.
It's a pipe dream that we can actually eliminate war on the planet. My other question, I call it the mystery question, is why do we still have war anyway? I mean, if survey after survey says that people want peace, how come we still have war? So we'll look into this a little more deeply, but before we do, I want to share an experience I had. My husband and I were in Panama just before the pandemic struck about a year ago, and we were reading about the Panama invasion, which you may recall happened in 1989. And we were learning that it had been concentrated in an area called El Chorrillo. And we wanted to go to El Chorrillo, but to our astonishment, the concierge in our hotel refused to help us, saying he could not guarantee our safety. So we spoke to a friend we'd made on the street who reluctantly agreed to take us, provided we slumped down in the car and didn't draw attention to ourselves. And off we went to El Chorrillo. He said it wasn't just our safety he was worried about, it was his as well, because he was with us and we looked American. So we're slumped down in the car, we're driving into El Chorrillo, and the first thing we see was this huge, very fresh, very angry mural on the wall. And for those of you who don't speak Spanish, it says, "Never forget, never forgive." And we're thinking, oh my God, this happened 30 years ago, and this anger is so fresh and so raw. What are we missing here? And what we were missing was the fact that 4,000 civilians died in the Panama invasion, most of them from El Chorrillo. And what we were missing was the sheer trauma that was inflicted on this community. One moment they are asleep in their beds at night just a few days before Christmas, and the next moment this. Imagine the fear and the terror and the desperate need to protect the children. And people were found dead in their home. People were found fused to their car because some kind of new laser weapon was being tried out. People were found with bullets in the back of their head. And everyone was evacuated from their home, and then systematically, block by block, using walkie-talkies, the soldiers blew up the homes and burned them to the ground. And all Dave and I could think was, how come we didn't know this? I had watched the coverage of the Panama invasion on television. How come we didn't know this? Now, the other story I want to share with you is the story of my own Rotary journey. I had an interesting Rotary journey. I joined Rotary, already a peace activist, having gone to the conference in Toronto in 2018, and I was high as a kite. I just imagined there would be all kinds of synergies between the work I was doing with World Beyond War and what I could be doing within Rotary. But after a while, I started to have questions. If war is the greatest threat to peace, what was Rotary doing to help end war? And in many Rotary circles, the word war isn't even in use. And how is Rotary helping shift the trillions of taxpayer dollars that are going into war to positive peace? And how is Rotary using its voice at the UN and on the world stage to advocate for what the Institute of Economics and Peace calls cloud solutions to the issues of shifting to peace? And I was beginning to wonder, I wondered if Rotarians knew that there had been 250 major wars since the Second World War, 50 million people killed and so on, displaced, injured, bereaved, that war was the #1 contributor to the climate crisis, and that it was costing 2 trillion taxpayer dollars per year going into war and the preparations for war. 1 trillion from the US alone, 500 billion from the NATO allies, and 500 billion from the rest of the world. And according to the Institute of Economics and Peace, it was taking almost $6 trillion out of the peace economy. And I wanted to work on these issues. I wanted to educate people about this. And I wanted to look at the big picture because I knew that there was this huge military industrial war machine out there that was costing us and undoing all our good deeds, basically undoing them. And I felt that Rotaries, it seemed to me anyway, that the focus on positive peace, the exclusive focus, was asking me to willfully ignore what I knew. And I couldn't do that. And in the end, I resigned. But I wasn't gone for long because the district governor-elect of our district asked me to replace him as district peace chair. And he gave me a mandate from heaven. Yes, talk about the positive peace initiatives that Rotary is doing, but yes, he agreed with me. Canadian Rotarians would be interested in what was happening with the peace movement in Canada, and they would be interested in what it was going to take to end war. So I had a mandate from heaven, and I imagined I would talk to every club in our district. But again, about a month later, I received a cease and desist order from the then district governor of our district. And I was told that no, in our district, the only thing a peace chair can talk about is peace centers and peace scholars, and raise the money that we need to support the peace centers and peace scholars. So you can imagine this wasn't enough for me, but this time the pandemic was in full force. We had a stay-at-home order, and I decided to stay and explore what Rotary was doing internationally. Up until this point, I'd had more of a Canadian focus. So I attended all kinds of peace conferences all over the world, podcasts, speakers events, some of them not by Rotary, but many by Rotary. And I took every online course being offered by Rotary Action Group for Peace and by the Institute of Economics and Peace. And I took several courses, in-depth courses being offered by World Beyond War. I was busy. And on top of that, I found myself on the receiving end of about 30 emails per week from Rotarians working to prevent nuclear war. And nuclear war wasn't even on my radar screen. I was a peace activist, but it wasn't on my radar screen. And so I put those emails in their own folder automatically in my inbox, and I looked at them over the weekend. But something really interesting happened inside me as I was doing this. I felt this shift, and I felt myself become absolutely convinced that in fact, Rotary could be instrumental, absolutely instrumental in shifting our planet to peace. And I'd like to share a couple of the experiences that were so pivotal for me in coming to this understanding. I went to a conference put on by a Rotary club in India and a Rotary club in Pakistan. I didn't know anyone there. I was just a fly on the wall, but there they were, two nuclear powered countries with a disputed border between them. And they were talking about how to diffuse the tension. And I just felt honored to be there. And this was a Russian podcast, a podcast on the problem of Russia, I put quotes around that, that was put on by a Western group. And a question came from the audience, a Rotarian, who's here tonight actually. And she said, has anyone ever thought about actually talking to the Russian people? And I thought, what a concept. Yeah, let's talk to the Russian people instead of listening to these talking heads talking about Russia. And I went and looked it up, and I know all of you already knew this, but I did not know that we had 77 clubs in Russia. And I thought, this is fantastic. And we have the intercountry committees between clubs in Russia and clubs in the US and clubs in Russia and clubs in Canada and so on. This is fantastic. And then there was the Rotary Peace Incubator Conference. Imagine putting on a peace incubator conference in Europe last year. There were 50 proposals related to peace. And there was one that was just so fantastic. It was a partnership between Rotary Action Group for Peace and World Beyond War, in which they were taking 10 students from 10 countries and giving them a World Beyond War course on building peace and ending war, and then mentoring them in a project in their own country. And I thought this was amazing. And we had the Canadian team assembled. Other countries included Venezuela and Cameroon and Uganda. Wow. So I'm pretty keen. And that brings me to the emails. I'm taking them seriously now. I'm reading them, and I'm starting to follow the threads, and I'm recognizing just how little attention I have been paying to nuclear weapons. I'm calling it the culture of denial that I was part of. And of course, I hadn't considered the culture of denial because I was so much a part of it. And just to tell you a brief story, with my permission, my husband was disposing my books, bins of my books, and I watched them going out the front door of our house, and I felt anxious, and I ran out and I grabbed this book on the top of the last pile. And I loved this book in the 80s because it was a book about how consciousness shifts. And I'm so interested in that. How does societies evolve? How does consciousness shift? And briefly, it's the story of a scientific experiment on an island off the coast of Japan. And the scientists at one point started dropping sweet potatoes on the beach. And the monkeys loved the sweet potatoes, but they did not like the grit from the sand. And then one day, one 18-month-old female monkey washed her sweet potato in a nearby stream, and she loved it. And she showed her mother, and her mother loved it, and her friends picked up the habit, and gradually a small group of monkeys adopted the habit. And then one day, one monkey who had never done this before washed his sweet potato in the stream, ate it, and loved it. And to the amazement of the scientists, almost overnight, the tribe adopted the habit of washing their sweet potatoes in the stream. It was as if the added energy of the 100th monkey was a tipping point. And that's what I mean when I talk about tipping point, and can Rotary be a tipping point? Now, there's more to the story, but that's not why I'm telling it to you now. I'm telling it to you because, to my utter amazement, this was not a book about how consciousness changes. This was a book about preventing nuclear war. And I was so much, I wasn't just part of the culture of denial, I was a poster child for the culture of denial around this, because I had no memory that this book had anything to do with preventing nuclear war. Now, other issues I had not considered, the war game mindset. Even as we speak right now, there could be soldiers training to be able to launch a nuclear bomb in minutes to destroy our planet. Think of the consciousness around that. And the first strike doctrine, which we've all been reading about, think of the fear that that engenders, and the state of readiness and the distrust and the anxiety that that is engendering around the world. And the threat of use. This was a new one for me. I mean, they haven't been used, right? Nuclear deterrence works, right? Except that if I take a gun and I hold you up and I rob you, have I used the gun? And yes, I have. So don't think that they haven't been used. The threat of use is always there. And one presenter told us about 30 times that he knew of when the threat had actually been articulated. And this one is perhaps one of the most frightening of them all. This was a presenter who laid out a timeline from World War II to today and told us about 50 times that we were this close to nuclear disaster, large or small. And he said, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Because when you have that many weapons and that many people handling them and that much technology behind them, there's that much possibility for something to go wrong. We draw a line in the sand for democracy, don't we? And yet somehow we have allowed the most fundamentally undemocratic situation to arise, in which just a few people can make a decision that can impact billions of us. And this I know I don't need to belabor. Staggering amounts of money, taxpayer dollars, that are going in to maintain, modernize, and expand nuclear weapons that we can never use. And so I say, it's those of us, you and me, who are outside the industrial military complex. We're the ones with perspective. We're the ones who can clearly see that as long as there are nuclear weapons on the planet, peace is not possible. So I can answer my question from the beginning. No, it's not possible as long as there are nuclear weapons on the planet. The threat is always there. So back to my question, how on earth did we arrive at this situation with an escalating nuclear arms race, $2 trillion going into war and the preparations of war? How on earth did that happen? And there's been a lot of analysis done and research, and I refer you to John Horgan's book, The End of War. He correlated every possible kind of factor to war to find out where the correlations were, and he found only one. And his research has been supported by many others. Only one. Wars are made by cultures that celebrate or tolerate war. I live in Canada, one of the 10 most peaceful countries in the world, and I live in a culture that tolerates war. And he makes the point that you can tolerate something even while telling a pollster you oppose it. Real opposition takes work. So we can think of it like this. The culture we live in tolerates war, and the 250 wars since World War II are the tip of the iceberg. Now, of course, we don't want war in our countries, war over there, and that is what we are tolerating. And the culture is so much broader and deeper, and we're unconscious of so much of it because it's in our books and it's in our movies and it's in our games and our historical markers and our educational systems and our monuments. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So Einstein says no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. How, given that we're living in a culture with military consciousness, how can we shift to peace consciousness? How can we shift our culture? And I come back to the story of the 100th monkey. There was a point at which, if only one more person tunes into a new awareness, consciousness shifts. So that awareness is picked up by almost everyone. And we know intuitively that this is true. We can look to the Berlin Wall It was up for years and it fell on a weekend. Why? Consciousness shifted. Or we can look to the women's movement. I was part of a consciousness raising group in the 70s. It was exhilarating. And we all know that the world today is completely different for our daughters than it was for our mothers. Why? Consciousness shifted. But if we don't want to just accept intuitively that this is true, let's go to the research. And Dr. Erica Chenoweth at Harvard School asked the question, what percent of a population must change its thinking behavior to shift the population? What percent do you think? And I think you're going to be surprised. 3.5%. That's all it takes. 3.5%. And I believe in every pore of my being that we Rotarians are uniquely placed to help reach that 3.5% because we're everywhere. We're all around the world and we are functioning. We're all functioning in society. So how can we most effectively make this shift, help this shift happen? How? And of course, we have to start with ourselves. And I bring us back to the Panama invasion. Dave and I did not know. How come we did not know? And when we came back to Canada, we watched a documentary called The Panama Deception. And it said that television sold the Panama invasion. The anchors talked about it was a good day for us and our troops are doing well. There was no mention of the dead civilians. There was no questioning of the reason for the invasion, drug trafficking. We all know that wasn't the real reason. And my favorite example was one night on the NBC News when the US military occupiers were described as engaged in peacekeeping chores. You saw the pictures, peacekeeping chores. And the Latin American diplomats who condemned the invasion were described as a lynch mob. Now, I don't think our television anchors consciously were selling us on the Panama invasion. I believe they were given some information, they believed it to be true and complete, and they were passing it on to us. And I was listening and I believed it to be true and complete, and I accepted it and I moved on without question. So this is what we have to do. We have to recognize the culture that we live in and the stories that it is telling us, and we have to question them. And then we look at the big picture. What can Rotary be doing to help raise peace consciousness? And I say, let's consult the scientists. We consulted scientists for how to handle the pandemic. Let's consult the scientists on this. And I watched the entire unveiling of the Doomsday Clock this year. And you know that they've left it at 100 seconds to midnight, the closest that it's ever been. And they had three major reasons for doing this. And reason number one was the accelerating nuclear weapons programs. Our scientists are terrified of the accelerating nuclear weapons programs. So if we're going to listen to the scientists, we better start by getting familiar with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which entered into force in January. And think about this. We had comprehensive treaties for chemical weapons and biological weapons and landmines and so on, but until now, not nuclear. But now we have a treaty for nuclear weapons. And it helps stigmatize nuclear weapons and serves as a catalyst for their eventual elimination. So here's where it stands right now. 135 nations participated in the negotiations. 86 states have signed and 55 states have ratified the treaty. 69 nations did not vote, among them all the nuclear weapon states and all the members of NATO. So that's the situation. So if we're going to consult the scientists and if we're going to take them seriously, and I really think we should, I suggest that what Rotary could do is advocate for worldwide support of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Think of the difference that that could make if Rotary International endorsed the treaty and we advocated it for its support worldwide. Now, I'm guessing that some of you might be thinking, but. What is wrong with her? How long has she been in Rotary? How could she possibly not have figured this out? Doesn't she realize? Does she have bricks for brains or something? Rotary can't get involved politically. Doesn't she realize that? And my answer to that is, I don't think so. Because I read February issue of Rotary magazine about how we eradicated polio from Africa. I read it 3 times, the article. And there were 4 major challenges we faced, and the strategies we used to overcome every single one of them were political. How did we handle the issue of conflict? Negotiated truces and military protection. How do you do that without being political? What about the issue of rumors becoming a political thing and the misinformation that was out there? What did we do? We advocated with government leaders and educated the public. How do you advocate with government leaders without being political? And the hard to reach children. What a brilliant idea. We coordinated, we had to, the borders were so porous. We coordinated cross-border campaigns with surrounding nations. How do you coordinate campaigns with surrounding nations without being political? And finally, my personal favorite, political will. You know, eradicating polio was not a priority for many of the governments in Africa. So individual Rotarians use their respective roles in society and often their personal charisma to advocate directly with government officials in their countries to become active in polio eradication. Now, if that isn't the very definition of political, advocating directly with the government in your country for something you want them to get involved in, then I don't know what is. So I think we should be a little clearer in our thinking. It's not that Rotary can't get involved politically. It's that Rotary can't be partisan, because my fellow Rotarians, it is an indisputable fact that when it comes to saving lives, Rotarians can be brilliantly and effectively political. And we could just as easily cross out eradicating polio in Africa and substitute advocating for worldwide support of the treaty. And we'd face exactly the same challenges, and we could use exactly the same strategies to overcome them. We've done this already. We did it brilliantly. We did it effectively. We know how to do this. We can do this again. We can do this. So if we were to do it, how would we go about this? Well, we start by applying the 4-way test. And would worldwide support of the treaty make us safer, leading to the elimination of nuclear weapons on our planet? Would it make us safer? And of course, the answers are yes, 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 and yes. Step 2, promote the summit. This is a wonderful way of raising awareness. Our president, Shekhar Mehta, is speaking at a summit on September 30th with the president of the International Red Cross and the Undersecretary General for Disarmament from the United Nations. The topic, eliminating the existential threat of nuclear weapons. This is wonderful. And if you haven't already, send this poster to everyone you know, Rotarian or non-Rotarian, everyone you know. Send it to the schools in your district. We want as many people as possible to come to this summit. So promote the summit, please. And I've heard Shekhar Mehta speak many times. I've heard him say things like, we shouldn't be arming ourselves with weapons we won't use, and spending money on clean water is more important than the arms race. And you've probably heard him say this: think big, achieve the audacious. So let's do it. Step 3, we need to promote the resolution that will come in front of the Council of Resolutions this year, October 1st, when they sit down. And some of you may not be familiar with the Council of Resolutions. We can talk about that after the presentation. But when they sit down, this resolution will come forward that requesting the board consider endorsing the treaty. Now, it's been sponsored by 3 districts, 1 in Australia and 2 in Canada, and there's interest in all of these other districts in the resolution. We're spreading the word as best we can far and wide, but this is not going to be easy to get this resolution passed. Last year, a similar resolution was defeated by over 2 to 1. Now, on the Council of Resolutions, there is a representative from every district. So the 535 people on the council represent the 535 districts in Rotary. And it's the same people who will be voting again this year. And we need 268 to say yes. So we need 135 representatives to change their mind. And we know people don't just change their mind on a dime. And so we've created a bunch of convincer strategies that we're hoping will persuade them. And we're getting the word out as much as we can now. And certainly awareness of the summit would be hugely helpful in persuading them to change. We also understand that one of the major reasons some of them voted against the resolution last year was they looked at it, they said, looks political, no, and that was the end of the thought that they put into it. So we're hoping that we can create a more thoughtful response this year with a 3-minute video that talks about that. Now, how can you help? If you feel inspired to help us, Anne has created a Google Doc with a progress in which we keep a progress report of how we're doing. So if you just email her, she can send you this information. Plus, we've created a checklist of everything that you might need to reach district representatives in your local area where you live. So we're asking you, if you feel so inspired, to talk with Rotary clubs in your area, find out the name of their Council on Resolutions representative. The district governor will know if they don't, and then contact the council, the representative, hopefully with a local club, and talk about the resolution. Give them a copy of the resolution, let them know it's coming, tell them about, give them the 3-minute video, which interrupts that habit of automatically saying no because it looks political. Reach out and connect to as many district representatives as you possibly can, and keep us posted on your progress. Thank you. If you feel so inspired, that would be awesome. Also remember that we have overwhelming public support for this, overwhelming, survey after survey, poll after poll. And in a recent one done just after the treaty was ratified, 70 to 80% of citizens in polls in Belgium, Iceland, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, Canada, Japan, and so on, support the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and want to see it ratified worldwide. We have overwhelming public support. So think big, achieve the audacious, grow Rotary to 1.3 million. Again, idea. By endorsing the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, Rotary is speaking for the 70 to 80% of the world who wants it endorsed worldwide. And when we speak for something that is so compelling and so important to so many people and so relevant to the very survival of our planet, we become a more compelling and relevant organization. And when we do that, it's inevitable. We will grow membership. It's inevitable. I just threw in the Nobel Peace Prize for fun. So I come back to the question, can Rotarians be the tipping point? And we really would like to know what you think. And so I'm going to Hi, everyone. I'm just going to post a so I've just posted a very, very, very short poll. It will take you it will take you 39 seconds, maybe 38 to answer it. So if you see the link in the chat and you just click on that, and then come on back. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, excellent.
Are we back? Jim, do you want us to all unmute, or what would you like?
Yes, now we ask for comments, questions, thoughts, opinions.
Here, you can raise hand. You can have them raise their hand.
And we're a small enough group, you can raise your hands, speak up. Barbara,
I really just want to thank you so much, Helen. It was an excellent presentation, right to the point. And I watched the Courier, I think last, the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I was a scared kid when that came about. And I'm writing some letters to my grandchildren right now. And that's one I want to put in. Yeah, I think your argument is great that if we can cure polio or help eradicate polio as a Rotarian, why not really make our peace clubs, our peace activity even more powerful by supporting this treaty? And honestly, I didn't know about it. So I thought I was well informed, but thank you very much for all the information you gave us.
Thank you.
how do we change our method of dealing with conflict away from military? Gene Sharp has 200 different options on how we can create peace before we go to war. When we say war is our last option, should we believe that?
Absolutely not. Because the human mind is incredibly creative, and there's always another option to look at. So no, we shouldn't believe it. When I did the Women in Rotary International presentation that Jim and Peggy, you were at, you will recall that there was a couple of people from Sri Lanka who spoke afterwards. And prior to that presentation, I thought we were going to talk about Sri Lanka. So I immersed myself in the Sri Lankan Civil War. And I had a few slides that I wanted to talk about and so on, but it was taken off the agenda because everybody wanted to move on. And in my mind, it was like a kind of a collective amnesia that the war had even happened. But what I learned as I was going through everything that happened, and that civil war goes back to the colonial times, was all these points along the way when different decisions or perspectives could have changed. I mean, I was in tears by the end of it, because there was just so many places where a different approach would have led to a completely different outcome. And today we still have this mentality from the Second World War, whereas today we have tons of research in nonviolent. Well, you guys know this, Jim knows this, in nonviolent defense. Erica Chenoweth, whom I mentioned earlier, says that nonviolent resistance is twice as likely to be effective as violent resistance without the death and destruction that comes from war. Twice as likely to be effective. So no, if someone tells you a last resort, it's a last resort. Ask to see the other 999 that they looked at first.
Bill Timpson has a question.
Helen, I heard you on Tuesday, yesterday, same talk. So I enjoyed
Sorry
it then
about
too.
that.
No. But here's the question. How do you keep your own hopes alive? Because, we've been with this nuclear threat since Hiroshima. Countries are competing to develop their own arsenal. Look at North Korea. How do we turn that around? And I know the world came together to ban mustard gas in World War I, and they've come together in the past. So give me your best hope for this turning this thing around.
Have you heard of something called the overview effect?
No.
So this is an experience that many, many astronauts report. It's almost like a spiritual transformation. They're coming back to Earth. They see the little blue dot in the sea of black. It's so fragile and it's so precious. And all borders just disappear. And they just have this completely different feel about our planet, and many of them come back and dedicate themselves to doing what they can to help shift our planet to peace. So the more that we can give our political leaders the overview experience, the better. And I think as more of us are coming from that perspective, we will elect leaders who are reflecting where we're coming from. So.
I've had a chance to meet Mairead Corrigan Maguire in Northern Ireland, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. And she always put her faith in grassroots efforts.
Yeah,
and that has stayed with me. Grassroots efforts.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about. That's my mission, really, to just attract as many people as possible, Rotarians and non-Rotarians, to the peace movement from a grassroots point of view.
Great.
And
Thank you.
Helen, we have a question. I'm sorry, Bill, are you
Done.
I was gonna say something about Meg Reed. How do you say her name?
Mairead Corrigan Maguire.
Yeah, so she was at a peace conference that I went to in Ireland a few years ago. Were you there, Jim?
No, but I have my picture with her.
So she's so charming, and
Or
she's
very well personally.
Yeah. Oh, do you? Okay. She's just so charming, and she stands up there and says, "You know, we may disagree, but just know, you guys, I love you. I love you."
Yes. Yes. Tom Carlisi has his hand up.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate, Helen, your presentation. Very clear, very direct. I got to meet Anne in Toronto at the International Convention. Also had a wonderful talk with her about this. But I really am really inspired by what was just mentioned about grassroots efforts. And I'd like to invite you to something, Helen. Several of us are on a international group called Chat with the Chair with Alison Sutherland. And she's the she's the past president of Rotary Action Group for Peace. And I've been part of, but she's been extraordinarily audacious, quote unquote, because she's been part of pulling Russia and Ukraine and Georgia together on a peace conference, Pakistan and India and I think Nepal on a peace conference. We're looking at the Middle East. She's the one that connected with Phil Giddings and led that motivation. So to me, there's a lot of energy going toward that tipping point from a grassroots point of view. And I studied with Marshall Rosenberg on the nonviolent communication.
Me too.
Certified trainer there, you know. But what happens that I believe is when you have grassroots connections, that's going to be, to me, how we're going to develop the 3.5%. Marshall used to use 5% as a number. When we hit that, it's going to be unstoppable. And what happens is, to me, you only have where you put your energy, you know. And I think obviously I would support the RI going for the treaty, and I will talk to our representative from 6690. I know him, you know, on how he's going to vote. But then what does it mean? It's a stepping point to get the ratification, to actually get Korea to stop, to Iran to stop, United States to stop. That's another mountain. Got to do a step at a time. But in the meantime, what are we doing? Like, I'm focusing on how do we get this to schools, after school, how do we systemically grow a consciousness? So my point is, I think we need to pick and choose where we focus our energy toward peace. So it's like a both and. Yes, let's all vote for that, and let's keep doing grassroots work. That's my point of view.
I agree. I do. Yeah.
And Tom Baker?
Excellent presentation. It was so well put together and very convincing. So you're promoting that Rotarians support the TPNW. And I was just curious, is this a main thrust of the Rotarians for the Prevention of Nuclear War?
Yes, they actually were a couple of the members of that group were instrumental in getting the summit to happen. And yes, they are fully supportive. That they're galvanized behind this.
So is that
effort.
a action group that anyone that is behind this effort through Rotary should be a part of?
You'd be welcome, obviously. These guys these are the people that were sending me the emails, as it turns out. And they've been at it within Rotary for years. And there's about 35 of them in all, and maybe 12 who come regularly to meetings. And so if you wanted to get involved in that way, excellent. The key right now is to connect, if possible, with as many district reps as possible and get them thinking about this and interrupt their pattern of going, oh no, that's political, no, so that we can get the resolution passed, because we feel we're at a magic moment right now between the summit, which is creating a lot of awareness at senior levels in Rotary, and the resolution, which is creating awareness at the grassroots level within Rotary, and a president who is open, clearly sees, he signed the Japanese Survivors Appeal, he supports the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We're in a place where we could seize the day, carpe diem, and maybe actually get Rotary International to endorse the treaty. The International Red Cross endorsed it immediately, and they're a completely neutral organization. And if they could do it in a nonpartisan way, so can Rotary. So yes, you'd be invited to come to that group. They meet every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And we're organized right now to two things: get as many people as possible to come to the summit, and galvanize Rotarians at the grassroots level to find their district rep, whoever the heck he or she is, and make them aware of this resolution, which is coming.
So what I'm hearing is really work with the Rotarians you know and in your district to bring this message.
Yes, please. That would be wonderful.
And the council legislation representative in this district is pretty much on board to NW.
We have a plan. Jim is part.
We are, yeah, unless Ray really just starts protesting at my house or something, why we will probably vote for it in our district.
Jim, you should explain that you voted against it last year.
I did. It was too political, Helen. It was way too political. But I have looked at what is politics, what is relevant. Are we relevant? Do we really stand for what we claim to stand for? And what does that mean? I have moved the dial in my own thinking. But my big focus, and I know Bill Timpson's is big focus in several of us, how do we change the culture? How do we change the culture of looking and dealing with conflict? I deal with anger management. I deal with individuals, angry individuals in prisons and courts and things. And I look at companies and political groups as big individuals. It's the same issue. There are options. Conflict is inevitable. Violence is a choice. There are ways of dealing with it. I was asked last night, well, how do you jump in front of the guns? We can do that.
A couple of things come up for me, Jim. I listened to a presentation once where the presenter said, if we took all the countries in the world who are experiencing war and we colored them in red, and we take all the countries in the world who are manufacturing weapons and military supplies and colored them in blue, there'd be almost no overlap. So a good start would be to help dry up the international arms trade. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say too, but it's gone because I'm old.
Yeah, hang on to that thought. Tom Carlisi has his hand up.
Just a quick
And another.
reinforcement, Jim, you said one of the things that can we get to the level of will to get in front of the guns, you know? And a dear friend of mine has passed on, but he was vice president of the international group called Peace Brigades International. And
Yes,
if you haven't heard from them, what a phenomenal group, because that's what they did. They were very, very judicious in their diligence on what they chose to do. And then they literally went and were the nonviolent keepers to promote peace and eliminate violence. So Peace Brigade International is walking the walk, you know, that group. Just want to let that bring in the awareness to that.
thank you. Denise?
One of the things I want to remind us all to do is to keep trying. Like if you went before up for a vote and it was defeated, and you're going to do it again. And if you're defeated again, just keep doing it. I think at some point we'll start chipping away at that resistance. And, you know, at some point, like you're going to have more than 133 at the next vote, because some of you have looked at it and said, well, maybe it's not so political. And some of us have been talking about it. So I think just keep going at it and keep talking to other people and saying, well, I changed my mind from last year or something like that.
Great. We have a question from Ray.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Helen, this has been an eye-opener for me, an excellent presentation, so I thank you very much. I'll have to say, prior to this evening, I hadn't heard anything about this subject and certainly had not heard anything about Shaker's position on that. And I've been on a number of calls with my district governor class in the Western United States, with him personally interacting with questions. And this subject has not come up at all. So I'm surprised but pleased at the same time, because as some on the screen will say, no, this is part of this subject, not so much the nuclear weapons, but certainly peace is part of what I talk about as I visit the clubs. And it's something that's very important. Just 2 days ago, I did receive the notice about the council and resolution. And so, Jim, it is something that you and I need to talk further about. And I think we're talking about the vote that's coming up on October 15th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is something that we should talk, more about. But Helen, thank you very much for this. Very enlightening and certainly informative for me. So I appreciate it.
Yep.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, one follow-up, Helen, I would love to have you dig into your PowerPoint and send something around that we could send out to people to give some background, some visuals. I know a lot of your PowerPoint is your story and your caricature and all that, but it would help me to have a more descriptive material to send around along with the resolution. The doomsday clock, for instance, or an image of the Hiroshima devastation. Those things speak volumes. Thanks.
Mhm. Okay.
I would agree with that. And also the world map where you have the 9 countries
Right.
mapped out on it. Yes.
Okay, the world map.
And Tom mentioned the tipping point. If you have some examples you can put up in front of people, how we turned away from polio, how we turned away from other, the mustard gas in World War I, those kind of things. A couple of sentences that would help.
I think there's actually a couple of people who are bringing to Saturday morning's meeting a one pager with some key points, and that might be exactly what we're talking about. So I'll see what they've done, and then I'll send it to Jim, and he can distribute it far and wide. Yeah. I think that poster of what Checker is doing. You have the poster, all of you? You have the poster? Okay. Because sending that out is fantastic for, raising awareness and making it okay to talk about nuclear in Rotary circles. I wouldn't say that this is his passion, Shekhar Mehta. I just think he's very open.
And it's a little closer to home with him.
Absolutely, with India and Pakistan.
And with India and Pakistan, yes, exactly. Any other last questions for Helen? Any other last comments? This has been fantastic, Helen. I can't thank you enough. Again, I'll leave space for last comments. And if not, again, any other questions, any comments? Tom, you have your hand up?
No, he's clapping.
Or is that a clap? I'm sorry, that's a clap.
I'm just clapping, Jim.
This is good. Yes, yes. We'll keep clapping. And Helen, I'm going to keep clapping also. So we thank you for what you're doing. We thank you for a very succinct message and with new ideas and challenges. I love the concept of relevancy, and even Denise's bear is clapping for you. So I have a feeling that we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Next month, we have another fantastic speaker, a gentleman by the name of Stanley Harsha, who has recently joined our district and joined our Peace Committee. He came to Indonesia in 1986 on his first overseas assignment as a United States diplomat. And like most people who set foot in Indonesia, he fell in love with it. He had 4 assignments in Indonesia, spanning 12 years of his 28-year career with the U.S. Department of State. He most recently served as U.S. Consul for Sumatra, with previous assignments as Deputy Political Counselor, Press Attaché, and Public Officer for Sumatra. During these years, he dealt with many issues, from religious tolerance and terrorism to democracy to building and human rights, as well as with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. He's written a wonderful book about his experiences. He was in Indonesia during 9/11, and of course, Indonesia being a Muslim country, didn't always have the same opinion that we did. And so his insights and his background and experiences will be well worth the listen. Helen, again, we thank you so very much. And with that, any other last comments? We bid you all adieu.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.